I never thought I'd meet someone meaningful at a speed friending event, but somehow that's exactly what happened. Picture this, a room full of strangers, all awkwardly shuffling between tiny tables, forced to introduce themselves and find common ground in under 5 minutes. Honestly, I went because my roommate begged me to get out of the apartment and talk to actual humans. I was expecting nothing more than some mildly amusing small talk, and maybe a new drinking buddy. Instead, I ended up sitting across from Luke, who completely threw me off my game. Let me back up a bit. I'm Chris, 27, working in marketing and generally a disaster at making friends outside of work and the occasional bar hangout. My social skills hover somewhere between mildly awkward and please don't notice me. So when my roommate, Josh, sent me the link to this speed friending event hosted at a cozy little cafe downtown, I thought, why not? Worst case, I get a couple of awkward conversations out of my system and a story to tell. The cafe was buzzing with this weird mix of nervous energy and low-key excitement when I arrived. People were clutching their drinks, nervously glancing around, trying to find their first friend date. The organizer explained the rules quickly. You get 5 minutes with each person, and the goal is to just chat and see if you vibe. No pressure, no awkward endings, just friendly conversations. Then came the moment of truth when we got paired up. That's when I met Luke. He was laughing at something the person before me said, and when our eyes met, he gave me this warm, easy smile that immediately put me at ease. Luke was tall, with messy dark hair and these striking green eyes that somehow made the room feel smaller and more intimate, even though we were surrounded by dozens of other people. Right away, there was something different about him. He didn't just smile politely or nod along. He looked genuinely interested, like he actually wanted to know who I was beyond the surface. We started talking about the usual stuff, work, hobbies, how weird it was to try making friends this way. But then, somehow, the conversation shifted. We ended up sharing stories that were way more personal than I expected to get into in 5 minutes flat. And just like that, the clock ran out, and instead of feeling relieved to move on, I found myself hoping the event would never end. Luke wasn't just another name or face in a crowded room. He was someone real, someone who made me laugh and made me want to keep talking even when the buzzer sounded. So yeah, going to that speed friending event was supposed to be a casual, low-stakes thing. Instead, it turned into something way more complicated, way more unexpected, and honestly, way more exciting than I ever saw coming. But that first conversation, it was only the beginning. After our 5 minutes were up, the buzzer sounded, and everyone shuffled to the next table like a well-rehearsed dance, but I stayed rooted in my seat for a second longer, watching Luke pack up his notebook. There was this flicker of hesitation in his eyes, like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure if he should. Hey, I finally blurted out, "Do you want to grab a coffee or something?" I mean, since we're already talking. It felt like such a lame, awkward thing to say, but it was the best I could do in that moment. Luke looked up, surprised but smiling. "Yeah, I'd like that," he said. "I was actually hoping you'd say something." We left the cafe together, the noise and chatter from the event fading behind us as we walked to a nearby coffee shop just a few blocks away. The air was crisp, early spring, with that feeling like something new was budding, even if I wasn't totally sure what it was yet. Inside the coffee shop, we found a quiet corner. Luke ordered some complicated-sounding drink I couldn't pronounce, and I stuck to a black coffee, more out of habit than anything. We settled in, and suddenly the 5-minute timer was gone. No buzzer, no pressure, just two guys leaning into a conversation that felt surprisingly easy. So, Luke started, stirring his drink. "What made you actually come tonight?" Most people I talked to seemed like they were dragged by friends or just wanted to see who'd show up. I laughed. "Honestly, my roommate. He's the outgoing one. I'm the please don't make me talk to strangers guy." I shrugged. But I guess I was curious too. Thought maybe I needed to shake things up a bit. Luke nodded, eyes thoughtful. "Yeah, I get that. I moved here a few months ago, and it's been kind of lonely. Work's great, but outside of that, not so much. Where'd you move from?" I asked, leaning forward a little. "Seattle," he said. Big change. He smiled, but there was an edge to it, like he missed something. I could relate to that. I'd grown up in this city, but felt like I barely knew it sometimes. So, what brought you here? Job opportunity, Luke said, shrugging. But mostly, I guess, a chance to start fresh. Maybe find some new people to connect with. Looks like this event was a step in the right direction. We slid into an easy rhythm, sharing bits about our lives. The kind of stuff that usually takes months to unpack, but somehow spilled out over the next hour. Favorite movies, ridiculous travel stories, a shared obsession with a band neither of us had seen live yet. I was surprised at how natural it felt, talking to Luke like this, like we'd known each other far longer than a few minutes. At one point, Luke laughed and said, "You know, this is way better than I expected." I thought these events were cheesy, but I'm pleasantly surprised. Same here, I admitted. I was fully prepared to just nod and smile through 5 minutes at each table. Instead, I'm kind of glad we got stuck together. His eyes met mine, steady and warm. Me too. We talked until the coffee shop started closing around us, the baristas politely hinting that they had to clean up. Outside, the street was quieter now, a soft glow from the streetlights casting long shadows. Neither of us wanted the night to end, but eventually, we had to say goodbye. Luke walked me back toward my apartment, and for the first time in a long while, I found myself reluctant to go inside alone. "Hey," Luke said as we stood outside my building. "Do you want to do this again? I mean, not the speed friending part. Just hang out." My heart did this stupid happy dance I could barely hide. "Yeah, I'd like that." We exchanged numbers, and I watched him walk away, that same easy smile lingering on his face. That night, lying in bed, I kept replaying the night over and over. How a random pairing at a speed friending event turned into one of the most genuine conversations I'd had in ages. It was strange, almost surreal, but in a good way. I didn't know where this was going yet, but for the first time in a while, I felt something close to hope. The next day, my phone buzzed. It was Luke. Just a simple message. Coffee again, maybe with less crowd and more time. And honestly, I couldn't wait. I replied almost instantly, "Absolutely. When are you free?" It felt weirdly thrilling, texting a guy I'd only just met, but who already felt like a familiar part of my life. Luke suggested that Saturday afternoon would work, so we settled on a local park cafe he said had the best pastries in the city. Saturday came around, and I found myself pacing around my apartment, wondering if I was overthinking things. Was this just another casual hangout, or was there something more hiding beneath all these easy conversations? I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I knew I wanted to find out. When I got to the cafe, Luke was already there, sitting at an outdoor table with a cup of coffee and a croissant that looked way too good to be real. He waved me over with that same smile that had gotten me the night before. "You made it," he said, standing up to greet me. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, trying to sound casual, even though my heart was doing that stupid pounding thing again. We settled in, sharing the pastry and swapping more stories. Things like how Luke had almost bailed on the speed friending event because he was nervous about meeting new people, but had somehow ended up having one of the best nights in months. I told him about my latest failed attempt at online dating, which got a genuinely amused laugh out of him. There was an easy rhythm to our conversation, but I started noticing little things. How Luke's eyes would briefly catch mine when he thought I wasn't looking, or the way he'd lean in slightly whenever I told a story he found funny or interesting. It wasn't just friendship anymore. It was something warmer, more electric. At one point, Luke reached across the table and brushed a crumb off my sleeve. "You're adorable when you get nervous," he said softly. I blinked, caught off guard. "I'm not nervous." "Sure you're not," he teased. "Come on, admit it." I felt my cheeks flush, but instead of denying it, I just smiled. Maybe a little. There was a pause, the kind where the whole world seems to hush for a second. Luke looked at me like he was trying to decide whether to say something or just keep holding the moment. Then he spoke quietly. "I'm glad we met. I wasn't expecting to connect with anyone like this." "Me neither," I said honestly. "It feels different." He nodded. "Yeah, like real, not just small talk or surface level stuff." We finished our coffee, reluctant to leave even though the sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky. Luke suggested a walk, And I agreed without hesitation. We wandered through the park, talking about everything and nothing, but with that undercurrent of something unspoken, pulling us closer. As we neared a bench by the pond, Luke stopped and turned to me. "Can I be honest?" "Always," I said, heart suddenly racing. He hesitated, then smiled. "I don't usually do this, meet someone, and feel this kind of connection so fast. It's scary, but it feels right." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yeah, I get it. I'm scared too, but I'm glad you're here." There was a quiet intensity between us that I couldn't ignore anymore. Luke reached out and took my hand, warm, steady, and somehow grounding. I squeezed his fingers gently, feeling a rush of something new and thrilling. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, voice low. I barely had time to nod before he leaned in, and our lips met in a tentative, sweet kiss that sent a shock straight through me. It was soft, a little unsure, but charged with everything we hadn't said yet. When we pulled back, Luke rested his forehead against mine. "I'm glad we got paired at that speed friending event," he whispered. "Me too." I smiled, feeling like maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something I'd never expected but was exactly what I needed. As the sun set behind us, the park around us seemed to blur into the background. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone, and that was more than enough to keep me hopeful. We sat there for a while longer, fingers still intertwined, watching the sun dip behind the trees and the sky turn the shade of soft purple and orange that you only get in those rare perfect moments. Luke's hand fit perfectly in mine, like it wasn't just a coincidence that we'd ended up here, but something that had been pulling us together all along. Eventually, we stood up and started walking back toward the streetlights, lining the park paths. Neither of us was in any rush to say goodbye, which made every step feel like it stretched a little longer, like we were both holding on to whatever this was, this new thing brewing between us. "So," Luke said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I don't know if you're the kind of guy who goes for this kind of thing, but..." He trailed off for a second, then grinned. "Would you want to come over and watch a terrible movie with me? I promise it's so bad it'll be funny." I laughed. I actually love terrible movies. It's kind of my guilty pleasure. "Perfect. My place is just a couple blocks from here." We made our way to his apartment, and honestly, it felt like I was walking on air. That kind of nervous excitement you get when things feel new and right. Luke's place was cozy. Lots of soft lighting, bookshelves packed with all kinds of random stuff, and a couch that looked like it had seen a lot of late-night movie marathons. He disappeared into the kitchen and came back with a couple of beers and a bowl of popcorn. We settled in, and the movie started. So bad it was already making us laugh within 5 minutes. But it wasn't the movie that kept my attention. It was Luke, sprawled out on the couch next to me, occasionally reaching over to nudge me when a scene was especially ridiculous. At some point, the movie paused because Luke wanted to ask me something. He turned toward me, his expression a little serious now. "Chris, can I ask you something kind of personal?" "Shoot." He hesitated, then took a breath. "Have you had a serious relationship before? Like, with another guy?" It caught me off guard. Honestly, I hadn't talked about that much outside a few close friends. "No," I said honestly. "I've dated casually, but nothing serious. Mostly because I wasn't sure anyone was really right, you know?" Luke nodded, eyes soft. "Yeah, I get that. For me, it's been a mix of trying to figure out who I am and just not finding the right person. It felt weirdly comforting to be so open with someone I'd just met. There was this trust, this unspoken understanding that neither of us was pretending to be perfect. Maybe, I said slowly, we're both just figuring things out. Maybe that's okay." Luke smiled, this time with a warmth that made my chest tighten. "Yeah, maybe it is." We went back to the movie, but the energy between us had shifted. It was like something deeper had settled in. I found myself leaning into him, and he didn't pull away. In fact, he rested his head on my shoulder, and I felt this calm wash over me that I hadn't felt in a long time. The night stretched on. We talked about everything and nothing, our hopes, our fears, the weird quirks that made us who we were. I realized I could be myself around him, without the usual walls I built up with other people. When it was finally time for me to go, I felt a pang of something I wasn't ready to name. Luke walked me to the door, and for a long moment, we just stood there, neither wanting to break the spell. "Can I see you again?" he asked quietly. I smiled, the answer obvious. "Yeah, I'd like that a lot." He leaned in for a kiss, this one slower, more certain than before, and I felt like everything had shifted in that moment. It was like the start of something real, something worth taking a chance on. Walking back to my apartment after that night, I realized how much I'd needed this. Someone who could see me, really see me, and still want to be close. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see where this was going. The next few days felt like I was walking through some kind of weird, wonderful dream. Luke and I kept texting, but it wasn't the usual small talk or surface-level stuff. Our conversations felt like peeling back layers, sometimes light and silly, sometimes deep and a little raw. I found myself looking forward to every message, every call, every plan we made. I remember one afternoon when Luke invited me over to cook dinner with him. I'm not exactly a chef, but I figured it would be fun. He picked me up, and we went to his place to tackle what he called an ambitious stir-fry. Honestly, it was more like a chaotic, slightly burnt mess, but we laughed so much that it didn't even matter. Midway through the kitchen disaster, Luke caught me off guard by pulling me close for a quick kiss. "You're a disaster," he whispered, grinning. "Yeah, but I'm your disaster." I shot back, feeling warmth spread through me. We spent that night sprawled on the couch, watching some indie movie neither of us had seen, sharing stories about our childhoods, awkward high school years, and all the things that made us who we were. Luke told me about his family, how close they were back in Seattle, but how he'd always felt like the odd one out for being gay. I shared my own experiences, the times I'd felt invisible or like I was pretending to be someone else just to fit in. It wasn't easy to open up like that, but with Luke, it felt natural. Like there was no judgment, only acceptance. I could feel the walls I'd built around myself slowly crumbling. One evening, a few days later, we went out for drinks with a small group of friends Luke had introduced me to. I was nervous. Group dynamics weren't exactly my forte, but Luke stayed by my side the whole time, his presence a kind of anchor. When someone made a joke at my expense, Luke's quick wit and easy charm deflected it without making me feel embarrassed. It was the kind of support I didn't realize I had been craving. As the night went on, Luke and I slipped away from the group and found a quiet spot on the rooftop of the bar. The city lights stretched out beneath us, a glittering sea of possibilities. We stood close, the cool night air wrapping around us. "You okay?" Luke asked, his voice soft. "Yeah," I said, though part of me was still trying to process everything, just a lot. "But good." Luke smiled and took my hand. "This feels good, doesn't it? Like maybe we're on the right track." I nodded, feeling a smile spread across my face. "Yeah, I think we are." But even as I said it, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered doubts. Was I really ready for this? For someone new? For something real? I'd been burned before, or maybe just scared enough to avoid getting burned at all. And now here was Luke, breaking through those walls. Still, when he leaned in and kissed me under the stars, all those fears melted away, at least for the moment. Over the next few weeks, we fell into a rhythm. Lazy Sunday mornings with coffee and bad TV, impromptu road trips to nowhere in particular, quiet dinners where neither of us had to say much because the silence felt comfortable. We navigated the awkward early stages of getting to know each other's quirks and boundaries, the little moments that made things feel more real. One day, Luke invited me to meet his parents. I was nervous as hell. Meeting a partner's family is one thing. Meeting them when you're still in that everything is new and fragile phase is another level entirely. But Luke held my hand as we walked up to their house, and that steady squeeze gave me the courage to breathe and just be myself. His parents were warm and welcoming, and surprisingly, the morning went better than I could have hoped. They asked questions. Not the interrogation kind, but the kind that showed they genuinely wanted to know me. It was a huge step, and as we left, Luke squeezed my hand and whispered, "You did great." I smiled, feeling something swell in my chest, a mixture of pride, relief, and something way deeper. There were challenges, of course. Days when life got messy. Work stress, family drama, those little insecurities that popped up uninvited. But through it all, Luke was there. Not with grand gestures or perfect answers, but with presence. A text at the right moment, a surprise coffee, a listening ear. One night, after a particularly rough day, I found myself at his apartment, feeling raw and vulnerable in a way I hadn't in a long time. Luke didn't ask what was wrong. He just pulled me close, held me tight, and let the silence speak for both of us. "I think I'm falling for you," he said quietly after a while. My heart nearly stopped. The words felt huge, terrifying, and beautiful all at once. "I feel the same," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. We looked at each other, that fragile honesty hanging in the air. It was scary, but it was real. And for the first time, I believed that maybe this, us, was worth the risk. After that night, things changed, but not in the way you might expect. It wasn't like fireworks or some grand romantic gesture. It was quieter, deeper, like we'd crossed some invisible line and now everything felt harder and more honest. I remember waking up the next morning with that phrase swirling in my head, "I think I'm falling for you." It sounded so simple, but it hit me in this way that was completely unexpected. I kept replaying it over and over, like it was some kind of secret code I was trying to crack. Because falling for someone wasn't new, but falling for Luke? That felt different. We started seeing each other more, spending time not just in those bubble moments of fun and laughter, but also the messy ones, the days when one of us was exhausted or anxious, or just plain out of sorts. And I learned quickly that love wasn't just the easy parts. It was showing up anyway. One evening, I was at Luke's place after a brutal day at work. Clients had been impossible, emails piling up, and my brain felt like mush. I was sitting on his sofa staring blankly at the TV while he cooked dinner. He looked over his shoulder at me and said, "You okay?" I shrugged, but before I could answer, I felt the weight of everything catch up. Suddenly, I was telling him about the pressure at work, the constant feeling that I wasn't doing enough, that I was just barely holding on. Luke didn't say much at first. He just sat down beside me, reached out, and squeezed my hand gently. Then he put his arm around my shoulders, pulling me close, and I let myself lean in. There was a kind of comfort in that silence, a reassurance that I wasn't alone even when things felt overwhelming. "I'm here," he said softly. That simple sentence, so normal but so needed, made my chest tighten. I realized then that this was what love could be: presence, patience, the willingness to be with someone in their worst moments. We had our share of disagreements too, like the time we got into a stupid argument over plans for the weekend. It started with a miscommunication. Luke thought I wanted to go to a party with his friends, and honestly, the thought made me want to crawl under a rock. But I didn't voice it clearly enough. Instead, frustration built until it spilled out in the form of a snappy comment from me. We went quiet for a while, the tension thick in the air. I was embarrassed afterward because it was so unlike us, and Luke looked hurt. But instead of letting it fester, we talked it out. Real talk, no blame, just honest feelings. I guess I was scared. I admitted, scared you'd think I'm boring or not fun enough. Luke looked at me, that soft, understanding look that made me want to trust him even more. "Chris, I like you. All of you. You don't have to be anyone else." That night taught me that love wasn't perfect, but it was worth fighting for. Things got even more real when I met Luke's friends, his close-knit group that had become like family to him. At first, I was nervous, worried I'd come across as awkward or out of place. But as the night went on, I realized they were just as warm and welcoming as Luke's parents had been. There was this moment when one of his friends joked about Luke's terrible cooking skills, something Luke had joked about too. I chimed in with my own story about the disastrous stir-fry, and suddenly, I felt like I belonged. Later, Luke pulled me aside and whispered, "See? You fit in." I grinned, feeling a wave of gratitude. For the first time, I realized how much I wanted to be part of this world he'd created, this messy, imperfect, beautiful life. But amidst all the warmth, I couldn't shake the lingering insecurity that sometimes bubbled up late at night. The fear that maybe I wasn't enough, that Luke might eventually realize he deserved better. It was irrational, I knew that, but old habits die hard. One night, curled up on Luke's bed, I finally voiced it. What if this doesn't last? What if I'm just fooling myself? Luke shifted to face me, eyes steady and serious. "Chris, no one can promise forever, but right now I want this, with you. And that's real." His words were honest and grounding, like an anchor in a storm. I reached out, tracing patterns on his arm, feeling a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. From that point on, I decided to lean into the uncertainty, to trust this thing we were building, messy and imperfect as it was. And so we did. We faced the unknown together, learning, stumbling, laughing, and loving in our own way. Luke became more than just someone I met at a speed-friending event. He became my person, the one I wanted to text first thing in the morning, the one I wanted to share my weird jokes with, the one who made the ordinary feel extraordinary. Looking back, I still can't believe how unexpectedly it all started. A simple pairing at a speed-friending event that somehow turned into the most personal, real connection I'd ever had. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. Months later, sitting on Luke's couch with a warm cup of tea between my hands, I caught myself smiling without even realizing it. We were just there. No big plans, no perfect moments scripted out, just two guys who found each other in the middle of a crowded room and decided to stick around. It wasn't always easy. We had our share of doubts, missteps, and moments where life felt complicated. But through it all, we kept showing up. For each other. And that, I think, was the real magic. One rainy Sunday, we took a walk through the neighborhood, sharing an umbrella and stories about our pasts. The awkward, the painful, the hopeful. Luke stopped suddenly and reached for my hand. "You know, I never expected to find this," he said softly. "Not at a speed-friending event of all places." I squeezed his hand, feeling the truth of it deep down. Neither did I. But I'm glad we did. It's crazy how something so unexpected can turn into something so real. We stood there, the rain tapping a quiet rhythm around us, and in that simple moment, I realized how far we'd come. From nervous introductions and awkward small talk, to late-night talks and quiet companionship, we'd built something honest and lasting. As we walked back home, I thought about how love doesn't always arrive with fireworks or grand speeches. Sometimes it's found in the little things, the shared smiles, the comfort of a hand to hold, the courage to be yourself with someone else. Looking at Luke beside me, I felt a warmth that wasn't just from the rain or the cozy sweater he'd lent me. It was something deeper, a feeling of belonging, acceptance, and hope. And honestly, that felt like everything